Viewer discretion is advised.
Few teams actually make cheating part of their mantra. And that's what Al Davis did, as he had a sign posted above the locker room that read, Rule 1, cheating is encouraged. Rule 2, see Rule 1. I mean, do you think a guy who looks like this would do such a thing?
Oakland Raiders Carroll and Mark Davis. Mark Davis is the son of Al Davis, almost the exact replication of Hank Steinbrenner in the NFL. Now, how Al Davis came to own the Raiders is really interesting. Davis was originally a coach in the AFL and really only had coaching aspirations. But as the fledgling league struggled in 1966, Davis was named the commissioner of the league, and he set upon a bold strategy of poaching the NFL's QBs. It worked, and the AFL and NFL merged, though Davis wasn't happy about this, and that got him fired as commissioner. He returned to the Raiders as head of football operations and was given a 10% stake in the team. And in 1972, he took over the whole thing. And maybe that was a bad thing, because with him as just a GM, they did really well. And as a guy who looked like the crypt keeper and owner, they didn't do so well. And will someone please tell Mark that haircut isn't working?
Holy shit, Fitzmagic is all over this video. In 2011, the Raiders jumped out to a 21-3 first half lead, which they blew at the start of the fourth quarter. However, they did have some fight in them as they traded TDs with the Bills until down 4. With 14 seconds left, Fitzmagic showed everyone why he earned the chance for the Jets to overpay him and found David Nelson for a TD to ice the 38-35 win. Remember when Derek Carr had all that potential and was going to be good? Remember when Khalil Mack was a Raider? Well, not too long ago, both of those things were true, except one fine November day, Mr. 7-9 laid a 52-point pounding on the black hole. Trey Mason went off 117 rush yards and 2 rushing TDs and caught 3 balls for 47 yards and a TD. Damn, son. Let's see, have the Raiders made any moves recently that have backfired? Have fun in Vegas, low-key, I can't wait.
Previously on Diva. At the end of the day, the final team standing is the Oakland Raiders. So they acquire him for a laughable sum, a 3rd and a 5th round pick. Rewarding his evolution into a completely unlikable cancer, the Oakland Raiders suddenly developed a windfall of money and rewarded Antonio Brown's temper tantrum. It's a payment near equal to his ego. A $20 million pay raise, over $30 million guaranteed. Antonio Brown. His entrance into Raider Nation was a harmonious time. It was an escape from a toxic situation. The Steel City had betrayed him. They would not placate to his demands any longer. With his trade to Oakland and over $30 million of guaranteed money, a new age would begin. Antonio would shed the toxic uniform of the black and gold for the liberation of silver and black. His opening press conference with the team would confirm just that. As he arrives late to it. Easy to excuse, you say. He may have been busy with other endeavors. Perhaps he was caught in other team activities. Everything would be fine. He will turn a new leaf, hold his teammates accountable for their actions. He should note that these words would help him forge a better relationship with his new coaches and teammates. Unlike the Steelers, Oakland will do everything in their power to keep him in line. Whatever was tolerated by his former team would be clearly not on the West Coast. During this time, AB would enjoy the benefits of cryotherapy in France. To rejuvenate him, to make him the best athlete he can truly be. Unfortunately for him, there are these nasty safety recommendations that AB failed to follow in terms of foot protection. The result was extreme frostbite, limiting him from his intense training regimen in the camp that is to come. But our friend Antonio would not be one-upped by anyone in this regard. Last year he arrived to camp by means of private helicopter, but he would need to make this one special. A new team deserves a new start. The wonders of the hot air balloon. No, there was absolutely no need for subtlety, especially after the off-season of escapades went for him. He doesn't need to since he won't be participating in the first few weeks of camp due to the frostbite. After that healed up though, it should be smooth sailing and heading to peace, right? Well, not if the NFL would have anything to do with it. It unfortunately turns out his preferred helmet, the Shut Air Advantage, no longer met the league's minimum safety requirements. He wasn't the only one. Tom Brady also had this dilemma over the past year, but has chosen to change to a new helmet. AB was not someone to be tamed, however. He wanted his precious helmet no matter what. He would even threaten retirement if he didn't get his wish. Seriously though, man, giving up tens of millions of dollars over a fucking helmet? Come on. The antics were starting to pile up like a crash on the Golden Gate Bridge and nothing would stop it. Brown, in his rather diva-ish ways, chose to make a public spectacle. He filed a grievance against the NFL for the helmet, only for it to be denied. As a result of the helmet issue, he proceeded to no-show practice. I know, shocking considering his past year of behavior. It's at this point where the Raiders are starting to have enough of his shit. They were once supportive of his plight, but now they know he's pushing it too far. A lesson needed to be learned. He was either all in or all out for the team. Most normal people would give it up and simply settle on the new helmet, despite the inconveniences they may or may not bring. You may notice by now Antonio Brown is not normal. He took to social media to secure an updated Shut Air Advantage helmet for the season. It appears that he did succeed in securing one, only for the NFL to deny it as well. A second grievance was filed towards the Shield, and unsurprisingly rejected. It was fortunate that he was able to find a new helmet to wear, so we can put this whole saga behind us and focus on what Antonio does best. It's at this time when we come to a dilemma. Is AB's best ability catching the football or creating incredible distractions? Once again, the Raiders are trying to corral the ego of Antonio Brown. They are practicing tough love by holding him to the same standard as everyone else. Cumulative fines of $53,000 for the practice no-show and not participating in a mandatory walkthrough are levied. This is where things get very convoluted. In most circumstances, a player would accept the fines and deal with them privately. You would guess, yes, but even worse. He published the official documentation of the fines on social media, criticizing them despite being completely in the wrong. No, Mr. Brown, you have no leverage here. They aren't hating, they're just trying to enforce their own goddamn rules. You're just chucking rocks at a hornet's nest. Next, you will tell me that Raiders management will get angry that AB went over their heads. Hold on, let me express generalized shock. Mike Mayock wants his team to know that nobody is above the law, and yes, this includes the diva in question. Unlike in Pittsburgh, they're not going to bury everything in order to placate him. They will confront him on his actions. Antonio, unsurprisingly, did not take this well. He was openly hostile with Mayock, verbally assaulting him for damaging him and his character. In typical bridge-burning fashion, he threatened to punch him in the face. When in doubt, threatened physical violence. In fact, upped the ante by calling him a cracker and a bitch. That's definitely the way to get in management's good graces. To top it all off, he punted a football and said, "Find me for that." Be careful, if it's a 50-yard punt, you may be stuck on special teams duty. Even more than being restrained by Fontes during the exchange. Yes, that one. Probably won't happen since the big statement was made. He unfollowed the Raiders and Derek Carr on Instagram. Considering he lives on social media, this is probably more damning than anything. Like, dude, what are you doing? We scorned bridesmaids in Pittsburgh knew any team you went to was going to have their hands full, but to implode before playing it down? You do realize that everyone now thinks the return the Steelers got is a steal, right? All you're doing is proving every one of your critics right. And it may cost you everything. The Raiders plan on suspending Antonio for an undetermined period of time. If the dice roll a certain way, it may even cost AB nearly all of his guaranteed money. They could cut him for no penalty if they so desired, if this is the case. It doesn't matter the talent if you can't get onto the field, you know? Where does this lead the Raiders? Will Antonio Brown get the message and focus on his talents? Is Mike Mayock trying too hard to be a hard ass? Does John Gruden have to make a tough decision regarding the brewing civil war? We will answer that right now. They will do nothing. AB is not suspended and will in fact be starting in week 1 of the NFL season, thus guaranteeing his money for 2019, undercutting Mayock and making him into an organizational puppet. The Raiders just look really spineless here. You had a situation to tell your team that nobody was above the logo on the helmet, yet Gruden chose to appease a diva's fragile ego. Remember, they said the worst was over when they gave Hitler the Sudetenland. Everyone knows this will flare up again. It's only a matter of when. What a joke.
1 week later.
Seems like a good morning indeed. I could get some yard work done, work on a few long-term projects, a nice, relaxing day. Can you please stop for 5 minutes? To think I was expecting things to die down for a few weeks before AB decided to strut the peacock feathers again. No, this event would occur as the rendered video was cooling down. Things seemed to have calmed, but Antonio took to the skies of YouTube to release a video on the situation. This is no ordinary video, you see, for Antonio has intelligence. He released a private conversation between him and John Gruden. Why is this a problem? One-way recording without the other person's consent is illegal in the state of California. I don't care that Gruden apparently thought it was awesome. He violated law and broke the fucking trust between him and the coach. Okay, but that should end it. Let's just go to sleep and reassess everything in the morning. I can't have a moment of peace, can I? The Raiders barely had AB back into the fold again, so what do they choose to do? Try and reinstill discipline on the Diva, because that worked so well the last time you tried it. But this time, he would have to learn a hard lesson. Antonio Brown had punted a ball and said, "Find me for that." And they did. For over $215,000. Better have been a great pun and argument, since this comes with an added bonus. All of the guaranteed money is now void. Antonio Brown has pissed away $30 million, and for what? His ego? Instead of just going out there and doing his job, he chose to pout and bitch up a storm about every goddamn thing under the sun. He learned nothing from Pittsburgh. He put himself over the team yet again, and it may have cost him everything. Hell, these are even worse than the stunts he pulled as a Steeler. AB unsurprisingly outright refused to play for Oakland. He had demanded his release via Instagram. With the guaranteed money no longer in play, what was the point of playing for a team that didn't give him incentive? Why should he have to earn his paycheck week to week? He's Antonio Brown. He always gets what he wants. This time, the Raiders would capitulate to him. Antonio Brown was released. From an emotional apology 24 hours earlier to burning the last bridge out of town as a final fuck you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is how you destroy a career. The Raiders may look like absolute shit here, but the big loser is Antonio Brown. Pissing away more than 99.9% of the world will ever make him potentially his entire career down the drain because he couldn't keep his fucking head in check. Even worse, after all of this, he still considers himself the victim. He thinks he's free because he sabotaged his own reputation through a series of fucked up events. Look, AB, when people like O.J. Simpson and T.O. are telling you to calm your tits, I don't think you're as much of a victim as you think. The thing that angers me the most is that he had it all. Godlike athleticism, ability, money, fame, adoration. Yet he squandered it all out of pettiness. At least with guys like Gordon, Bryan, and Blackman, they fell due to trying to escape their demons. With the Diva, it was his desire for more. What he had was never enough. All the love and care and adoration in the world wouldn't have sufficed. He just wanted to go higher and higher. Antonio must have never heard about Icarus. So where does this leave AB now? Well, he's out tens of millions of dollars, his professional reputation in tatters, 2 scorned fan bases in his path, and a future of serious doubt. No, I don't think his professional career is over. There's going to be a team desperate for his talent that thinks they can control him. What, you expect a real team like the Patriots to gamble on taking in this cancer? That'll be the day. And what a shocker, he got another job quickly. The newest team he'll be ruining is... Are you fucking kidding me?
Dad, go.
Fuck everything. Seriously, fuck everything. Dude got rewarded with a stronger team by pulling another fucking temper tantrum. A $15 million salary and $9 million signing bonus. For that preseason, yeah, he took a pay cut with New England, but it's a 1-year deal. He'll make that money back when another stupid team gives him a new contract. You know he's going to turn into this goody two-shoes now and put up all-pro numbers. It's what the Patriots do. The rich get richer. Gonna turn into a salt mine by October, good Christ.
You can't keep getting away with it! You can't keep getting away with it!
Al Davis subscribed to a simple mantra. Just win, baby. But during the mid-90s, the Oakland Raiders were doing a little less of that than what the man in charge was used to. Looking for a fix, Davis brought in John Gruden to lead his team. Patience through 2 8-8 seasons was rewarded in 2000 when the Raiders won their first division title since 1990. Their 12-4 campaign came to a halt, though, against the eventual champion Ravens, in part due to a Tony Siragusa belly flop that knocked Gannon out in the second quarter. A season later, the story was the same, this time falling in even more heartbreaking fashion to the Patriots and Tom Brady's infamous tuck. Having come so close, the Raiders knew they were nearly there. Rich Gannon had turned into an all-pro quarterback, which had helped Tim Brown continue his dominance to the tune of 9 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. In addition to dual-threat running back Charlie Garner, the Raiders' offensive explosion was aided by Jerry Rice deciding to don the silver and black. With defenses focusing on so many weapons, Jerry Porter became a key piece as the team's deep threat. Much of the credit for piecing it all together goes to Bill Callahan, Oakland's offensive coordinator who followed Gruden to the Bay. But after the loss to the Pats, Callahan stepped into an even bigger position. Seemingly out of nowhere, with Gruden's contract up in the air, Davis traded his head coach to Tampa Bay in exchange for 2 first-round picks, 2 second-rounders, and $8 million. Callahan took the reins, looking to finish what Gruden started. And in 2002, the Raiders looked even better. Their defense with 9 new starters caught up to the offense. A linebacking core led by newcomer Bill Romanowski helped set the tone. Like their fans in the Black Hole, they were built to intimidate opposing offenses, which was made easier by defensive tackle Rod Coleman bearing down on quarterbacks. Rising star Charles Woodson was locked in at corner, while another veteran newcomer, Rod Woodson, made the secondary a turnover machine. Gannon put together an MVP season. Rice and Brown never lost a step. Garner did what no one else in the league that year could do with 900 yards rushing and receiving. And after a third straight division title, the Raiders glided past the Jets and Titans for a chance to win the franchise's 4th Super Bowl. And in order to do that, all that sat in their way was a familiar face. How hard could it be? Super Bowl 37 was over before it began. The Buccaneers dominated the championship, making it 34-3 in the third quarter before the Raiders flirted with a comeback that ultimately fell short. After a year spent recovering from the Tuck game, this result hurt even more for many reasons, the obvious being their failure to show up on the biggest stage. But how they failed made it even more painful and showed some of the cracks this team would need to overcome. First off, on offense, the Raiders had never changed the language they used. Gruden had spent the week preparing Tampa Bay for his former quarterback, even playing the role of Gannon on the practice team himself and barking out the plays as he knew them in Oakland. That meant anytime Gannon looked to check out of a play, Warren Sapp or John Lynch called out what was coming, which resulted in 5 picks for the Bucs defense. While that's frustrating enough, there was a belief among some of the offense that their own coach had sabotaged their chances. After working on one game plan for the week leading up to the game, which would have made use of their size advantage on the line and aimed to run the ball down Tampa's throat, on Friday night, Callahan had a change of heart. He presented them with new orders: air it out. This change was either the result of, or it resulted in, the departure of a key Raiders piece, starting center Barrett Robbins. At the time, where he was or why he left was a mystery, but it was eventually revealed to be the result of his mental health struggles, resulting in a stay at the Betty Ford Clinic. Without him, the Raiders finished with just 19 yards rushing, in part due to the early hole they could never climb out of. The lackluster performance left some of Oakland's stars asking why someone would completely change the plans on such short notice. While it seems absurd that Callahan would actually sabotage his own team or his own chances at a Super Bowl, it isn't far-fetched to believe that he would rather have been on the other team. See, when Gruden was traded to the Bucs, it was also with the agreement that he couldn't bring any of the Raiders' coaching staff with him. While Callahan had found success in Oakland, the reason he was there was Gruden, who had given him his first offensive coordinator job after working together in Philadelphia. Some of the players on the Raiders had the sense that Callahan didn't want to be in Oakland even when Gruden had been there. But coming off an 11-win season, Davis's catchphrase rang even truer. Not a whole lot changed for this team that offseason, and they looked to remain in position to challenge for another division title. Before any football could be played, though, the Raiders were making headlines, some in very Raider-esque fashion. During training camp, Bill Romanowski took issue with second-year pro Marcus Williams, who was blocking the 16-year vet on your average practice rep. As the play came to an end, Romo ripped off the tight end's helmet, then punched Williams in the face, leaving him with, among other things, a broken eye socket. Romanowski apologized, but it would essentially end Williams' career and open up a lawsuit during the season. As a positive spin, it was at least a distraction from the Raiders' preseason performance. Their sloppy play led to skepticism that this was a team capable of what they'd pulled off a year ago. And after a 2-2 regular season start, those concerns were justified. The Raiders went into a complete freefall. Romanowski was put on IR after continued concussion issues, and Gannon joined him not long after with a shoulder injury. Garner was limited to just 9 starts thanks to injuries plus a suspension from Callahan in the final week of the season. The offense that had fired on all cylinders a year ago was reduced to a shadow of itself. Brown and Rice combined for just 4 touchdown receptions, and the defense let opponents score at will. Raiders defensive tackle Rod Coleman put it simply: you go from sugar to shit in one season. That's horrible. You can't blame it all on the players. A year after reaching the Super Bowl, Oakland managed just 4 wins, doing so with a roster that seemed to finally be showing its age. Given how big of a shock their collapse was, the moves to right the ship weren't major surprises. Despite all he'd done for the offense, Callahan was let go by Davis, a move that likely made both coach and locker room happy. Davis went outside the organization to replace him with Norv Turner, who made a major change of his own. Out went the West Coast offense, in came a power run focus with a vertical passing attack that had served Turner pretty well. The trouble was, Oakland didn't quite have the pieces to make this work. Garner had left in free agency, signing a massive deal to reunite with Gruden in Tampa. And as for the offensive line, the unit that had given up 43 sacks a season ago was being reconstructed, primarily through the draft. The good news there was Oakland's 4 wins in 2003 were tied for fewest in the league, so they earned the 2nd overall pick. But even having 10 picks for the 2nd year in a row couldn't fill the holes in the roster. Coleman, their sack leader of the last 2 years, left for Atlanta in free agency. Romanowski officially retired that summer, and during training camp, the team finally said goodbye to Tim Brown. Aside from Al Davis, Brown had been the face of the Raiders seemingly since he was drafted in 1988. Even when the rest of the offense sputtered, he shone as one of the league's best. Along with Brown went Rod Woodson. While his time in Oakland was short, he helped take the 2002 squad to another level as he tied for the league lead in interceptions. As they lost a handful of veterans, one of the younger guys who had cemented himself as a top corner missed training camp with a contract dispute. Charles Woodson didn't want to play on the franchise tag. The club didn't want to pay him what he wanted long term, but they had no trouble shelling out elsewhere on defense. Like other aging players before him, Warren Sapp joined the Raiders for a hefty fee. It was symbolic of Oakland's struggles. Whether blinded by recent postseason success or Al Davis being Al Davis, players past their prime were favored to the talent that could provide a future rebound. Although Woodson would eventually sign and play on the tag, nothing was saving the Raiders' defense. They spiraled even further, ranking near the bottom in all major categories. It was a similar story on offense, where they were once again forced to go without their star quarterback. Gannon injured his neck in the 3rd game of the season. It sent him immediately to injured reserve and led to his retirement the following year. In place of the 38-year-old came the comparatively youthful Kerry Collins, who many had thought would threaten Gannon's starting spot before the season. In his 13 starts that year, Collins proved why that hadn't been the case. It was, once again, a long year. One star who was spared was Jerry Rice. The receiver was flipped to the Seahawks after a lackluster 6 games. While most of his career had been spent in a different part of the Bay, he formed a terrifying duo with Tim Brown and deserved a fair share of credit for those postseason runs. With little threat of an air attack, the ground game, which was especially key in Turner's offense, never got on track. As a team, the Raiders had more turnovers than offensive touchdowns in 2004. But the silver and black lining was they actually improved on their win total from a year ago. Just by a win, baby. Now here's the thing. Oakland essentially completed their collapse in record time. That Super Bowl team was more or less gone just 2 years later. But a big part of Oakland's collapse is the fact that once they were down, it felt like nothing they did could get them back up. While they only had 9 wins over the previous 2 seasons, they'd done so with a roster decimated by injury. The bigger problem was that it was a roster also decimated by bad decisions. They had accumulated loads of draft picks, but rarely were taking players worth a second contract. From top to bottom, depth was an issue. At receiver, once Rice was traded away, Porter became the de facto number 1. Sure, he had a career year, but it was hard for Davis to go from 2 of the greatest wide receivers to ever play the game to, well, you know. Sorry, Jerry. As a result, Al Davis made an extremely Al Davis move. He went and got himself Randy Moss. The Vikings' star receiver became available after he displeased Minnesota's organization. Moss pretended to moon the crowd. He exited a game with 2 seconds left. He even shouted at some Vikings corporate sponsors. So, some pretty bad stuff. But the Raiders, as had always been the case, took their chances if the talent was there. They sent Napoleon Harris plus a first-round pick in exchange for Moss. It was a move viewed as extremely on-brand for Oakland, gambling on a mercurial receiver with a high price tag who was coming off his worst season as a pro. At his introduction, though, it seemed like Moss was happy to have a fresh start. He said he was in love, heaping praise on Al Davis and the entire Raiders organization, even putting his own spin on the owner's catchphrase. In addition to the receiver, Oakland upgraded their running game by bringing in Lamont Jordan. They were moves that showed a commitment to Turner's scheme and even led to some optimism for what this team was capable of. Once the season began, Moss got back to his 1,000-yard form. Jordan did the same on the ground. But with up and down play at quarterback, a team that led the league in penalties for the 3rd straight year, and a 6-game losing streak to finish the season, the Raiders were stuck in reverse. After just 2 years, Davis called an end to the Norv Turner experiment. They also cut ties to their veteran quarterback, in a move partially for the sake of freeing up cap space. One area that extra cash wouldn't be used was for Charles Woodson. The Raiders drafted Woodson 4th overall in 1998, and the accolades poured in immediately. But after 2 years playing on the franchise tag and a 2005 season that ended with a broken leg in the 6th game, he was more than ready to move on. From there, Oakland fell further into a cycle of dysfunction. Davis brought Art Shell back for a second head coaching stint. Shell knew it wasn't the easiest task, given the locker room he was taking over, but he had a fairly simple mindset. If there was a mutual respect between players and coaches, this team could turn a corner. But in his very first meeting with Jerry Porter, that proved to be easier said than done. As Shell pushed for Porter to stay in California and work out with the team that offseason, the receiver grew agitated. Things got more heated when Porter admitted that he didn't like how things were going around there. At that point, Shell understandably lost it. Porter asked to be traded. The Raiders asked for way too much. So, nothing changed other than Porter getting suspended by the team. But this team was so low that, at the time, it still felt like there was nowhere to go but up. As even John Clayton wrote in his 2006 season preview that while they weren't back, they were finally heading in the right direction. Instead, Oakland delivered one of the worst offensive performances in NFL history. The 2006 Raiders scored just 12 offensive touchdowns and had 7 games where they were kept out of the end zone entirely. A revolving door at quarterback spat out 24 interceptions while the team lost an absurd 22 fumbles. The sad part was the defense actually turned the corner. Sapp reached double-digit sacks, and they gave up the 3rd fewest yards in the league. But despite those efforts, Oakland sunk to their worst record since 1962, their 3rd season in existence. Shell was quickly shown the door again. The Raiders were set to pick at the top of the draft again, and Moss made his frustrations known again. His 2006 was as disappointing as any other Raider, and after just 2 seasons was clearly no longer in love. While rumors swirled of a Moss for Aaron Rodgers deal, he got the freshest of starts in New England. By the time he was a Pat, the Raiders had a new face of the franchise, having selected Jamarcus Russell 1st overall. The LSU star was paired with first-year head coach Lane Kiffin. Long story short, neither addition worked out. They brought in more speed. Didn't help. They tried coach after coach after coach, and it wouldn't be until 2016 that the Raiders had their first winning season since their Super Bowl defeat 14 years prior. But unfortunately, Al Davis wasn't around to see it. The man who had served the Raiders since 1963 passed away during the 2011 season. He had spent his time building up the team, feuding with commissioners, and doing things his way. The struggles continued without him, and his final years were a far cry from the heights he had raised the organization to. But even though they couldn't win it all in 2002, when the Raiders were good, they were really damn good.